Imagine pulling into a dusty gas station on a scorching summer afternoon, the kind where the heat waves dance off the asphalt, and suddenly a simple glance turns your world upside down. Mark Harlan, a 52-year-old electrician with grease-stained hands and a heart as steady as his old Harley, had made this stop countless times before, nothing more than a routine pit stop on his way home from a long day wiring homes in rural Texas. But on that fateful July day, as the sun beat down relentlessly, he noticed her, a young woman no older than 22, with tangled auburn hair and eyes that darted like trapped birds. She stood by the snack aisle, her thin frame swallowed by an oversized hoodie despite the 95-degree heat, accompanied by a burly man in faded jeans who hovered too close, his voice a low growl that carried across the store. Mark grabbed a cold soda from the cooler, the glass door hissing shut with a soft thud. And that's when it happened. The woman's phone slipped from her hand, clattering loudly against the tiled floor. The sound echoed in the quiet store, mingling with the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. She bent down quickly, her fingers trembling as she reached for it, but her eyes flicked up toward Mark for just a split second, a silent scream of fear that hit him like a punch to the gut. The man beside her muttered something sharp. "Pick it up, clumsy!" his tone laced with impatience and control, grabbing her elbow roughly enough to make her wince. Mark paused, his soda sweating in his hand, pretending to browse the chips while keeping an eye on them. He'd ridden with the Lone Star Riders Club for over 20 years, weekend escapes on winding roads, charity poker runs, and the unbreakable bond of brothers on bikes. He wasn't one to judge appearances. After all, his own leather jacket and tattooed arms often drew wary looks from strangers. But something felt off here. The way she shrank under the man's gaze, the unnatural pallor of her skin, the way she clutched her phone like it was her only anchor in a storm. The phone dropped again, this time skittering toward Mark's boots. He heard her soft gasp, felt the tension thicken in the air like humidity before a rain. The man sighed heavily. "Again? What's wrong with you today?" His words were casual, but his eyes narrowed, scanning the store for any prying eyes. Mark stepped forward instinctively, bending down to retrieve the device. As he handed it back, their fingers brushed, and she pressed a crumpled scrap of paper into his palm, her touch cold and desperate, her nails bitten to the quick. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, cracking like dry leaves underfoot. Her eyes locked onto his again, wide and pleading, conveying a terror that words couldn't capture. Mark felt a chill race up his spine despite the heat. He nodded calmly, slipping the note into his pocket without a flicker of reaction. "No problem at all, ma'am. Have a safe trip," he said, his voice steady, forcing a friendly smile that masked the adrenaline surging through him. The man eyed Mark suspiciously, his jaw tightening, but said nothing as he steered the woman toward the exit, his hand firm on her lower back, a grip that screamed possession rather than affection. Mark watched them through the store's grimy window, seeing them climb into a battered grey SUV with tinted windows, the engine rumbling to life with a throaty growl. As they pulled onto the highway, dust kicking up behind the tires, Mark's heart pounded in his ears. He unfolded the note under the counter, his fingers steady from years of precise wiring work. The handwriting was frantic, scrawled in blue ink. "Help us, being held against will. Grey SUV plate TXL4M 927. 2 more girls in back. Please call police." Mark read it over and over, the words blurring as his mind raced. He could smell the faint scent of fear on the paper, sweat and desperation. Images flashed in his mind. Her trembling hands, the man's controlling stance, the unspoken cry in her eyes. This wasn't a lover's quarrel. This was something dark, something evil, hiding in plain sight. He pulled out his own phone, dialing 911 with hands that now shook slightly. Yes, emergency? I think I've just witnessed a kidnapping or worse. A woman passed me a note at the gas station. He relayed every detail, the plate, the descriptions, the direction they headed south on I-35. The dispatcher, a calm woman's voice on the other end, assured him units were being dispatched. "Stay put, sir. We'll need your statement." Mark leaned against his bike outside, the leather seat hot under the sun, his mind swirling with what-ifs. What if he hadn't noticed? What if he'd ignored the drops like so many others might have? He thought of his own daughter, safe at college, and felt a surge of protectiveness for this stranger. The wind picked up, carrying the distant roar of semis on the interstate, and he wondered how many times she'd tried this before, how many dropped phones had gone unnoticed in the rush of everyday life. If this story is touching your heart and reminding you of the power of a single act of kindness, hit that subscribe button for Road Motorcycle Diaries right now. We share real stories like this that restore faith in humanity, tales of friendship, love, and compassion on the open road. As the minutes ticked by, Mark called his old riding buddy Tom, a retired cop who'd seen his share of ugly cases. "Tom, you won't believe this," Mark said, his voice low, recounting the encounter. Tom listened intently, the phone line crackling slightly. "Sounds like trafficking, Mark. We've been hearing about rings moving through these highways. Good on you for noticing. I'll loop in some contacts. Stay safe." Mark paced the parking lot, the gravel crunching under his boots, replaying the scene in his head. Her fearful eyes, the man's menacing presence, the note's urgent plea. He could almost hear her silent screams echoing in his mind. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows, and Mark's worry grew. What was happening in that SUV right now? Were the other girls okay? Had he done enough? 40 miles down the road, highway patrol sirens wailed as they closed in on the grey SUV, but Mark didn't know that yet. All he knew was that one dropped phone had pulled him into a nightmare, and possibly a miracle. Part 2 to 3, the rescue that shook the highways. Sirens screaming across the Texas interstate, blue and red lights cutting through the golden dusk like a blade of justice. That's how the nightmare ended for 3 terrified young women, all because one biker refused to look away. Mark Harlan was still standing in that sweltering gas station parking lot, his Harley ticking as it cooled down, when his phone finally rang 2 hours after his 911 call. It was Tom, his retired cop buddy, voice tight with urgency and relief. "Mark, they got him. Highway patrol pulled over the grey SUV about 38 miles south. Driver tried to rab it, but they boxed him in. Found 3 girls in the back, bound, gagged, scared out of their minds. Your note saved their lives, brother." Mark's knees nearly buckled. He leaned against his bike, the hot metal grounding him as a wave of emotion crashed over him. Relief so sharp it hurt, anger at what those girls had endured, and a deep, humbling gratitude that he'd been there at the exact right moment. He could still see her face, the young woman who'd risked everything to slip him that note. Her name, he learned later, was Sophia, 21 years old, taken from a bus stop in Oklahoma 2 months earlier with promises of a job that never existed. The rescue unfolded like a scene from a movie, but raw and real. Troopers had spotted the SUV matching Mark's perfect description, plate TX L4M 927, confirmed on their hot sheet. They initiated a routine stop, lights flashing, hearts pounding under their vests. The driver, a thick-necked man named Victor with a rap sheet longer than a summer day, immediately started sweating, hands shaking on the wheel. "License and registration," the lead trooper said calmly, but his partner was already circling, flashlight sweeping the tinted windows. That's when they heard it, a muffled thump from the back, followed by a faint, desperate whimper. Victor floored it, tires screeching as he tried to flee, but a second patrol unit was already blocking the road ahead. Spike strips shredded his tires in seconds. He barely made it 100 yards before surrendering, hands up, cursing under his breath. When they popped the rear door, the smell hit first. Fear, sweat, and despair. Sophia and two other girls, Lily, 19, and Emma, 20, were huddled on the filthy carpet, wrists zip-tied, duct tape over their mouths, eyes wide with terror that slowly turned to disbelief as uniformed officers gently cut them free. "Are you okay? You're safe now?" one female trooper whispered, wrapping blankets around their shaking shoulders. Sophia burst into tears the moment the tape came off, sobbing, He said he'd kill us if we made a sound." The girls had been moved from motel to motel, forced into horrors no one should ever face, threatened daily. But Sophia had held onto a tiny spark of hope, clutching that phone, dropping it at every stop for weeks, praying someone would finally see. Back at the gas station, Mark gave his full statement to the detectives who arrived in unmarked cars. He handed over the original note, watching as they carefully bagged it for evidence. "You did good, Mr. Harlan," the lead investigator said, shaking his hand firmly. "That plate number broke open a ring we've been chasing for months. 2 more suspects arrested at a safe house in Austin before midnight. This is big." Word spread fast through the Lone Star Riders. By the next club meeting, everyone knew. They greeted Mark with backslaps, cold beers, and the kind of ribbing only true brothers can give. "Phone Hero Harlan," they shouted, laughing. "Gonna start calling you Lifeline Mark." But beneath the jokes was fierce pride. One of their own had stepped up when it mattered most. 3 weeks later, after the initial chaos settled and the girls began healing under protective care, Sophia asked to meet the man who saved her. They arranged it at a quiet diner off the highway, neutral ground with a victim advocate present. Mark arrived early, nerves jangling like loose chains on a bumpy road. When Sophia walked in, supported by the advocate, she looked different, still fragile, but with color returning to her cheeks and a tentative strength in her step. She stopped in front of him, eyes filling with tears. "You're the one," she said softly. "The biker who picked up my phone." Mark stood, removing his cap, suddenly unsure what to do with his calloused hands. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Mark. I'm just real glad you're okay." Sophia hugged him then, tightly, like he was family. "You have no idea," she whispered against his leather vest. "I dropped that phone at least 30 times. At gas stations, rest stops, fast food places. People either ignored it or handed it back without looking at me. I was starting to lose hope. That day, I dropped it because I couldn't think of anything else to do. When you took the note and didn't react, I thought maybe, just maybe." Mark's throat tightened. He sat with her over coffee, listening as she shared pieces of her story, not the worst details. Those would take years of therapy, but enough to paint the picture of captivity, fear, and the small acts of defiance that kept her going. She told him about Lily and Emma, how they'd become like sisters in hell, whispering encouragement in the dark. "We promised each other that if one of us got free, we'd make sure the others did too." Mark shared about his life, the open road, fixing electrical systems by day, riding for freedom on weekends. "I'm no hero, Sophia, just a regular guy who happened to pay attention." She shook her head fiercely. "That's exactly why you're a hero. Regular people can change everything if they just notice." The Lone Star Riders president, a grizzled veteran named Hawk, pulled Mark aside after hearing about the meeting. "Brother, you've got a gift. You saw what others missed. Ever thought about teaching folks how to spot this stuff?" Mark hadn't, but the seed was planted. If this rescue story is hitting you hard and reminding you that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, smash that like button, hit subscribe to Road Motorcycle Diaries, and turn on notifications. We bring you true stories of courage, compassion, and the unbreakable human spirit every week. And if you're able, join the channel membership. Your support keeps these stories coming to those who need them most. As Sophia walked away that day, she turned back with a small smile, the first real one Mark had seen from her. "I'm going to tell my story someday," she promised, "when I'm stronger, so no one else has to wait weeks for someone to notice." Mark nodded, watching her go, knowing that one dropped phone had ignited something unstoppable, a chain of awareness, healing, and hope that was only just beginning. 5 years after that scorching July afternoon, when a dropped phone shattered the ordinary into something extraordinary, Mark Harlan found himself back at the very same gas station, staring at the spot where it all began, feeling the weight of lives changed and a purpose reborn. The sun still beat down on the asphalt, heat waves shimmering like memories, but now Mark wasn't just passing through. He was there to speak, to share, to ensure no one else would ever have to wait weeks for a stranger's notice. At 57, with silver threading his beard and the same steady hands that once wired homes now holding awareness pamphlets, Mark had transformed from a quiet electrician into a beacon of change, all sparked by that one desperate glance from Sophia. It started small, just like Hawke had suggested. Mark began speaking at local truck stops and biker rallies, his voice rough from years on the road, but filled with conviction. "I was just like you," he'd say, standing before groups of weathered drivers and leather-clad riders, the hum of idling engines in the background. "Stopping for gas, minding my own business. But when that phone dropped, not once, but twice, I looked, really looked, and what I saw was fear, raw and begging for help. He described the scene vividly, the clatter of the phone on tile, Sophia's trembling fingers, the man's possessive grip that sent chills even in the heat. Audiences leaned in, feeling the tension, imagining the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the faint smell of spilled coffee and motor oil. With the Lone Star riders backing, Mark developed training sessions. They printed cards with signs to watch for, controlled movements, averted eyes, someone else always speaking for them, and hotlines to call. "Don't be a hero," Mark emphasized, his eyes intense. "Just notice, note it down, and report." That's what I did, and it saved 3 lives. The club turned it into Eyes on the Highway, a network of bikers trained to spot trouble during rides. Thousands joined, their Harleys roaring across states, stopping at the same shadowy spots where evil lurked. Mark felt the wind on his face during those rides, but now it carried purpose, the thrill of freedom mixed with vigilance. Sophia, true to her word, stepped into the light too. After months of therapy, reuniting with her family, a tearful embrace at the airport where her parents held signs saying, "Welcome home, our warrior," she began sharing her story. At first her voice shook like her hands once did, but strength grew with each telling. "I was lost," she'd say at conferences, her auburn hair now shining under stage lights, "lured by lies, trapped in a nightmare. But I fought back with what I had, a phone, a note, a prayer that someone would see." She'd recount the endless drops, the ignored pleas, the gas stations blending into a blur of despair. Mark was the one who saw. His kindness cracked open the door to freedom. They met again at events, an unlikely duo, the burly biker and the resilient survivor. At one anti-trafficking summit, they shared the stage. Mark started painting the picture of that fateful day, the heat, the drop, the note's shaky script. Then Sophia took over, her voice steady. "When he picked up my phone, he picked up my hope. I felt seen for the first time in months." The audience erupted in applause, many wiping tears, inspired by the bond forged in crisis. Mark watched her, pride swelling like a full tank on a long ride. She transformed pain into power, advocating for better laws, more funding for shelters, and education in schools. Trafficking hides in plain sight, she'd warn, at rest stops, motels, even diners. Learn the signs, save a life. The impact rippled out. Mark's trainings reached over 12,000 people. hotel clerks who now checked for mismatched IDs, ride-share drivers who reported odd behaviors, everyday folks who carried hotline numbers in their wallets. The Lone Star Riders program expanded nationally, bikers from coast to coast becoming guardians of the vulnerable. Dozens of tips led to rescues. A girl saved at a truck stop in Arizona, two sisters freed from a van in Florida, all because someone noticed a dropped item, a fearful glance, a plea hidden in plain view. One evening, after a grueling day of speaking, Mark returned home to his modest ranch house, the Texas stars twinkling like distant headlights. On his desk sat the framed note, yellowed but eternal, "Help us, being held." He traced the words, remembering Sophia's hug at the diner, her promise to speak. Guilt once nagged him. Why did it take so long for someone to notice? But now it fueled action. He'd learned not to judge the passers-by. Most weren't looking, weren't trained. That's why the work mattered, turning ignorance into awareness, apathy into compassion. Sophia visited him once, bringing photos of her new life, a college degree in social work, a small apartment filled with plants and light, even a dog named Harley in honor of her savior's ride. They sat on his porch, the sunset painting the sky in oranges and pinks, sharing stories. "Remember that gas station?" she asked, a soft laugh escaping. Mark nodded, the memory vivid. The clatter, the exchange, the call that changed everything. "It was the end of my hell and the start of our mission," she said. "We've closed the circle. Now we're drawing a bigger one, pulling more people in." Mark agreed, feeling a warmth deeper than any summer sun. One act of noticing had sparked a movement, proving that courage and kindness could outrun even the darkest roads. As they watched the stars emerge, Mark whispered, "Paying attention saves lives. It really does." Thank you for joining us on this journey through a story that restores faith in humanity. One dropped phone, one brave call, and a legacy of hope. If this tale of compassion and courage moved you, smash that like button. Subscribe to Road Motorcycle Diaries for more inspiring stories from the open road. And drop a comment below. Would you pick up the phone? What would you do? Your engagement helps spread these messages far and wide, reminding everyone that a single act of kindness can change the world. And one more call. Hit like if you believe in the power of noticing, comment your thoughts, você faria o mesmo, and subscribe to Road Motorcycle Diaries to never miss a story that celebrates friendship, love, and the unbreakable human spirit.